This weekend, Disney's Moana 2 is crushing it at the box office. Over the summer, Pixar's Inside Out 2 also killed it at the box office. So it seemed like the perfect time for a Disney-Pixar bracket showdown. I've got 8 Disney classics and I've got 8 Pixar classics. Over the last week, I've been posting polls on my community tab to help determine the winner. You cast over 200,000 votes in this tournament. It's time for a showdown. If you want to join in on the fun, you can go to the link down below in the description, fill out your own bracket, do a screenshot of it, share it on your Instagram stories, tag me in that post, and I'll share some of your completed brackets. As we go into this, I tried to pick 8 classics from Disney and Pixar, which cover the different decades and eras of the two studios, and then I used polls so that you could help me determine the best movies to put in the bracket itself. Now, how is this tournament going to work? Each round, the polls I posted get 1 vote, I get 1 vote, and if we disagree, the tie is broken by Rotten Tomatoes, where I will add together the critic score with the audience score. The movie with the higher score moves forward, and there's a few of these where it got unbelievably close. With all of that said, let's get started with round 1 with the Disney bracket. Our first pairing, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs versus Alice in Wonderland. The original Disney animated film versus the Silver Age classic. When it comes to Snow White, this, for obvious reasons, is one of the most important and influential animated films of all time, as it was the original feature-length animated film. It has stood the test of time, whether you're referring to the songs, which so many of us were raised on over the last 85 years, as well as just a story that connected with people well enough that we will be getting a live-action remake of it next year. And then you have Alice in Wonderland, another timeless classic that so many of us have been raised on, with so many quotable lines, so many iconic characters. Of course, it is based on the writings of Lewis Carroll, and it captures his absurdist nonsense so well. Now, I mentioned that a bunch of these pairings were incredibly competitive, and that is certainly the case here. When I first posted the poll, for the first 1,000 votes, Alice in Wonderland was actually in the lead. Then, for the second 1,000 votes, they were tied at 50-50. And that's how this whole tournament kicked off, with that level of competitiveness. Now, eventually, Snow White did pull ahead and have a definitive victory by the time that we got over 6,000 votes. So the poll vote goes to Snow White. As for me, this is how close this was. If you look at my ranking of all the Disney movies that I did just a few years back when Encanto came out, I ranked all of the Disney Studios animated movies. If you like Disney movies, be sure to check out that video. They're right next to each other on my ranking, which is crazy. It's that close. It was 50-50. Then they're this close in my ranking. But I got to give it to Alice in Wonderland because it did inch it out just a little bit in my ranking, both classics. But I did read Lewis Carroll growing up, so there's a little bit more of a connection there, just a little bit more. That means we head on over to Rotten Tomatoes with Snow White, 97% critic score, 78% audience score for 175 points total. Alice in Wonderland, 84%. Critics score, 78% as well on the audience score for only 162%. That means Snow White is moving on to the next round. Our second pairing, a bit of an odd one, where we've got Encanto versus Cinderella. And in the case here, Cinderella, of course, is a timeless classic that has now stood the test of time and entertained children for 70 years now. And once again, there's so many just elements in here, songs, plot points, characters that have become part of the pop culture. And then you have Encanto, a movie that was really enjoyed by a lot of people over the last few years. This movie has been played on loop in my house. Karis, my youngest, has the dresses of a couple of the ladies in the movie, sings the songs she loves. We don't talk about Bruno. And when the poll was first dropped, this is another one that was insanely close, where for the first 2,000 votes, 2,000, that's not a small number, it was 50-50. 50-50 right out of the gate. And then as time went on, Cinderella did pull ahead for a pretty definitive victory on this one. I'll say this, that I think Encanto performing as well as it did is a little bit of recency bias. That it's a movie that a large percentage of my viewers, who tend to be a little bit younger, will have seen that movie. They've seen it more recently. And a movie that is 70 years old, despite being a timeless classic, it's a film that not necessarily all of my younger audience will have seen. In the case of like my little girls, they've seen Cinderella 1 or 2 times. They've seen Encanto 20 times. You know, it's that sort of thing. That's the movie they've grown up watching a little bit more. So I think there was a little bit of that recency bias in the poll there. Likewise, when I put Encanto in the bracket here, there definitely were some people saying, is it really a classic? It only came out 3 years ago. These others have stood the test of time. This one really hasn't. That's fair, but I also want to include movies that were recent. Talking about, we want to have movies all across the decades, and so of this current era of Disney films, I think this one is pretty easily the best, so I included it. And it did perform very strongly against a timeless classic, but poll picked Cinderella. I'm picking Cinderella. Cinderella moves on. Our third pairing here, our Renaissance showdown, The Lion King versus Beauty and the Beast. Now, when it comes to these polls, there was a bunch of them where the comment section was filled with this same phrase, "Don't make me pick. How could you make me pick?" And that was actually the whole concept of this showdown, that ideally every single one of these pairings would be a brutal choice where you're picking between one of your favorites. And I think for me, that's what this is right here. I'm a child of the Disney Renaissance. I was the perfect age for that run from The Little Mermaid to The Lion King, of just fantastic Disney films. The fact that Aladdin and The Little Mermaid aren't in this tournament tells you just how great that run was and how many classics Disney has. And in the case of this one, the poll definitively went for The Lion King. And I imagine if you put Beauty and the Beast against almost any other movie in this tournament, it probably would have performed very well, might have had a lot of victories. It just happens to be running against The Lion King. Both of these are just fantastic films. Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film ever nominated for Best Picture, filled with fantastic songs, just a great love story. And then The Lion King, once again, absolute banger songs from beginning to end, classic Shakespearean drama, just stellar animation, 2 incredible films. Poll went for Lion King. Lion King's my favorite animated movie of all time. Of course, my vote goes for The Lion King, but man, The Beauty and the Beast didn't even make it to round 2 is wild. Final pairing of the Disney round 1 bracket, we got Frozen vs. Moana, our Disney smash hits of the last decade. I've got 2 little girls, 10 and under. Both of these movies have been played on loop in my household over the last decade. We've got the lunchboxes, the toys, the dresses, all of that fun stuff. As for me, if I'm picking between these 2 movies, I'm going to go Frozen. I've never been quite as strong as on Moana as many of you have been. I think it's good. There's a couple really good songs in here, but I just lean a little bit more towards both the songs as well as the characters, the side characters in Frozen. It just makes more of an impact for me. So that's my vote. As for the polls, this surprised me a little bit. You guys definitively went for Moana, and I shouldn't be too surprised by that because Moana is consistently one of the top streaming movies. Last year, it was the top streaming movie out of all movies out there, so shouldn't be that surprising that it keeps dominating. Part 2's crushing it at the box office, but I wasn't expecting a 2/3 victory over Frozen on this one. But this means we take it over to Rotten Tomatoes, where Frozen has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 89%, audience score 85% for a total of 174. Moana easily takes the victory here. 95% from the critics, 89% from audiences for 184%. Your pick, Moana, moves on. Today's video is sponsored by MeUndies. Holiday season is upon us, and MeUndies is the best brand I've found for unbelievable comfort. They've got you covered so you can be your coziest self. From lounge pants to hoodies, sweatpants, and onesies, MeUndies is so much more than just an underwear brand. And since the holidays are here, what could be a better gift for everyone on your list than the gift of comfort from MeUndies? MeUndies has a cut for everyone with over 20 different styles in hundreds of different colors and prints. My wife's favorite movie is a shark movie, so I got these shark patterned undies. So of course my wife loved them. MeUndies' signature super soft micro module fabric is breathable, stretchy, and so comfortable, making it ideal for all day wear. And during the holiday season where I'm just laying around, this is the comfort level that I want. If you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on MeUndies. Knock out all of your holiday gifting needs today with MeUndies. To get exclusive holiday deals and savings all month long, go to MeUndies.com/Sean Chandler. Enter promo code Sean Chandler. That's MeUndies.com/Sean Chandler, code Sean Chandler. MeUndies, comfort from the outside in. Moving over to the Pixar bracket, we have Toy Story 3 versus Monsters, Inc., our early Pixar franchises. Why did I go with Toy Story 3 out of all the Toy Story movies? Well, I put up a poll. I let you guys choose which Toy Story movie was going to be included. I knew Toy Story was going to be in the tournament. You picked Toy Story 3 as the best of the films. So when it comes to these movies, Toy Story 3, great movie. Lotso, the most diabolical of the Pixar villains, fantastic closeout to the, and satisfying closeout to the Andy trilogy of films. You got that sequence where they're about to be burned to death, actually made you think, maybe they're gonna kill off my characters. Then you have Monsters, Inc., another just great Pixar film with one of the best duos that they have. We got a cute little baby in Boo. If I'm picking between these two movies, I'm actually going to go Monsters, Inc. Just slightly. I mean, Toy Story 3 is fantastic. That's the problem with Pixar. They've got over 10 great movies. I'm going Monsters, Inc., but the poll definitively went for Toy Story 3. We got to send it over to Rotten Tomatoes. Here's once again where things start getting really, really close with Monsters, Inc. It has a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 96%. That's fantastic. Audience score of 90%. Another fantastic score. We are heading over to Toy Story 3. Its audience score also 90%. Can it beat a 96% critic score? It does with 98%. So Toy Story, by just 2 points, heads ahead to the next round. Then we've got Inside Out versus Coco. A couple of our Pixar films from the last decade. Coco is one that has an absolutely passionate fan base. It's my wife's favorite Pixar film. It's got some solid music in there. It's not, normally you don't get musical elements like you get in Coco in Pixar films, so something a little bit different from them.
Or you'll be stuck here forever.
Exploration about family, afterlife, bunch of great stuff in there. And then you have Inside Out, which I think is a fantastic exploration of our emotions and growing up, and is able to kind of take these abstract ideas in our heads and what we feel and visualize it in a way that is insightful for grown-ups but understandable by children. As someone that was an education major and that studied Piaget, I think Inside Out 2 is just a special film. My vote goes for Inside Out. The poll also goes for Inside Out. Coco, hey, I get, like, people love it. Inside Out, also one that people love. That's why these are so brutal, but Inside Out moves forward. Then we've got The Incredibles versus WALL-E, our Pixar films from the zeros. The Incredibles being this original superhero story with this retro 60s vibe to it. Great aesthetic, great characters. It's a movie that kids love because it's a superhero story. It's also a story about a midlife crisis, so it's something that adults can connect with on a deep level. And then you have WALL-E, a movie that the first half of it is basically a silent film. It's a romance, and then it's a sci-fi adventure out in space in the back half. All of it, it's so inventive, it's so different, it's so unique. My vote, it's going to be for The Incredibles. Both great movies, of course, but going for The Incredibles because it is just such a rewatchable film, such broad appeal, and a world you want to explore more. The poll agreed, also giving a definitive 72% to The Incredibles. And we've got our final pairing of round one with Finding Nemo versus Ratatouille. Now, I've said this many times before, Finding Nemo is my favorite Pixar film, so of course my vote is going to be for Finding Nemo. It was a movie that came out, or I watched it for the first time at the perfect moment in my life. It wasn't when it first came out. It was actually 10 years after the movie came out. My oldest child, Liam, I almost said my oldest child, Nemo. I'm getting confused here. My oldest child, Liam, had just turned 1. We watched Finding Nemo, and it's a story that's all about parenting. And as I was becoming a parent, realizing that parenting is letting go, this movie shows up on my TV that is all about letting go. And so it connected me on such a deep level. It's quotable, it's memorable, it's emotional. So of course it gets my vote. But Ratatouille, perfect example of how unique of a studio Pixar is, that they take this bizarre concept about a rat being inspired by a ghost, so he remote controls a man pulling his head to be a chef.
Weird.
It's an insane concept, but somehow it's wildly entertaining, it's accessible, it's profound, and it even has like dynamic, thrilling action set pieces because it's a movie directed by Brad Bird. My vote, as I said, was for Finding Nemo. Little bit of surprise to me. Ratatouille took the poll here, so we got to send this one over to Rotten Tomatoes to determine the winner once again. So incredibly close. We're going to kick things off with the audience scores here. Finding Nemo gets an 86%. Ratatouille, 87%. Ratatouille's critics score, 96%. Those are two great numbers. Can Finding Nemo take the lead? It can, with a 99% critics score, beating out a 96%. So Finding Nemo inches it out. My pick moves on to round 2. All right, after round number 1, this is what the bracket looks like, and we are headed into round 2. First pairing in round 2 on the Disney bracket, we have Snow White versus Cinderella, our Golden Age classic versus our Silver Age classic. And in the case of these two movies, Snow White is of course so iconic, but I think as a movie overall, Cinderella is just more refined. In the case of Snow White, when you're doing the first feature-length animated films of all time, you're figuring it out as you go along. How do you adapt these kind of shorts into feature? And I think you feel that with the movie, where Cinderella, they learned over a decade worth of lessons from their Golden Age era films and then moving into the Silver era after the War era, and it's just more refined. The storytelling is stronger. So my vote goes for Cinderella. The poll also gives it to Cinderella. Then we have a battle between the Renaissance and the Revival, The Lion King versus Moana, and I'll just throw the poll right up here. Lion King demolishes Moana with almost a 90% victory over the film. Once again, The Lion King is one of these movies that has just been beloved for decades. It is now multi-generational, and because they put out the Disney live-action remake, it then got that second burst. We have our Mufasa prequel coming out in just a few weeks. So despite the fact that Moana is beloved, easily beat Frozen, easily was included in this, its sequel dominating at the box office, The Lion King, true to its name, is an absolute beast Of course, The Lion King is my favorite animated film of all time, so I'm also going for The Lion King. And I feel bad when something gets destroyed this easily, but also it is facing the fiercest of competition. We're gonna move over to the Pixar bracket, and we have Toy Story 3 versus Inside Out. Now, I'll throw the poll right up here. The poll is not even close. As for your pick, you definitively went to Toy Story 4-1. So you guys definitely leaning towards Toy Story. I get it. It's a great movie. In fact, if you look at my ranking of Pixar movies, it places very strong. However, one spot ahead of it on my ranking is in fact Inside Out. So my vote goes to Inside Out, where I just think that that movie has something special about it in its way to be insightful as well as entertaining and emotional, pun intended. That means we are headed over to Rotten Tomatoes to settle this one. And this is wild how close this one gets. We're going to throw up both of them up on the screen. Let's look at our critic scores first. Both of them have a 98%. Each of the years that these movies came out, they might have been the highest Rotten Tomatoes score for a wide release film. Probably for each of these films. Beloved by critics. What did audiences have to say? Gonna throw Inside Out up there first at 89%. Can Toy Story 3 defeat that 89%? It can, with a 90% by just 1 point. Your pick, Toy Story 3, is moving on to the semifinals. Final pairing of round number 2, we have The Incredibles versus Finding Nemo. This, for me, is where it gets absolutely brutal, because The Incredibles is such an incredible movie that I love superhero stories. I want more original characters and things like that. And so you have one of my favorite directors, Brad Bird, doing one of my favorite genres and doing it as an original with The Incredibles with a cool retro vibe to it. But Finding Nemo is my favorite Pixar film. Thus, inherently, I'm always voting for Finding Nemo. So my vote goes to Finding Nemo. Poll, basically 3/4. You went for The Incredibles. Send it over to Rotten Tomatoes. And this was really surprising to me. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what's happening with these numbers, but The Incredibles, 97% Rotten Tomatoes critics score. Finding Nemo, 99% critics score. You almost cannot defeat Finding Nemo when it comes to its critics score. Finding Nemo audience score, 86%, less promising. But The Incredibles, this is the most shocking number to me in this entire poll, probably. Audience score for The Incredibles, 75%. I have no idea what's going on there. I have no idea why that number is so low, but it does mean Finding Nemo pretty easily, my pick, moves on to the semifinals. Before we move into the semifinals, if you enjoy these types of videos, I've done more like this, whether it's bracket showdowns, I've done Marvel, DC, Disney live action remakes, horror, so you can check those out in this playlist right up here. Also, if you're a big Disney fan, when Encanto came out, I did a ranking of all 60 Disney animated films. It was this massive project. And of course, I've ranked all of the Pixar films before, so you can dive into either one of those right up here when this video's over with. Here's what the bracket looks like as we head into the semifinals. Over on the Disney side, we've got a Silver Age classic versus the Renaissance classic, Cinderella versus The Lion King. I'll throw the poll right up here. As has been the case this entire tournament, The Lion King always devours the competition, and that is certainly the case here. This is the biggest victory of the entire tournament, where basically it is a 20-1 victory for The Lion King. 19 out of 20 votes went to The Lion King over Cinderella. Of course, my favorite anime film of all time is The Lion King. and thus it's my vote, but not really surprising here. The Lion King is just so beloved. It's also recent enough that it's a little bit more plugged into the popular culture. You, of course, had The Lion King come out 5 years ago. Then again, the Cinderella movie only came out about a decade ago. But this is not super surprising to me that The Lion King would win at that sort of level. I mean, I really do think that The Lion King is the culmination of the first 50 years of Disney and the best that they have ever offered on every single level. And you appear to agree as well. And that'll bring us to pick our favorite of the Pixar films. We've got Toy Story 3 versus Finding Nemo. Just like on the last one, I've said many times, Finding Nemo is my favorite Pixar film versus Toy Story 3. So of course, my vote is for Finding Nemo. The poll, definitively, you picked Toy Story 3, so we have to send it over to Rotten Tomatoes to decide. And this is another one where it just gets insanely close. Throwing Finding Nemo's Rotten Tomatoes critics score up there, we have a 99%. No movie on this list can beat Finding Nemo when it comes to that critic score, including Toy Story 3, which only has a meager 98%. Toy Story 3, one of the best reviewed movies of all time based off Rotten Tomatoes, still cannot defeat my pick, Finding Nemo. But then we got to look at the audience scores, where Finding Nemo has an 86%. Your pick, Toy Story, 90%. So you inch out the victory by just 3 votes. And Toy Story 3 is moving on to the finals. This is what the bracket looks like as we move into the big finale. And that brings us to the final showdown in the Disney bracket. We have The Lion King. In the Pixar bracket, we have Toy Story 3. These are 2 absolutely beloved films. Both of them have a multi-generational audience to them. Both of them are part of these franchises that continue to have a massive cultural footprint. Both of them are easily considered the best of their categories. They have made it this far for a reason. But who will be victorious? As we've said all along the way, my vote goes for The Lion King. Just a movie that it's so fun. It's so tragic and emotional. It's victorious. The songs are amazing. Animation is gorgeous. And it just has this sense of grandeur to it. So of course it gets my vote. But it's crazy to me that I voted against Toy Story 3 every single round. That's crazy. That's wild. But that tells you just how good Pixar is, because as I've said all along the way, Toy Story 3, it's a great movie. I'm not really voting against it. I'm just voting for something else that I like just a little bit more, because it is a movie that finds a way to do a Prison Break movie with this franchise. It's something new and different in the third movie, and not every trilogy can be as satisfying as this movie ends up being. But my vote goes for The Lion King. As for the poll, all along the way, The Lion King remains undefeated, a very strong 2/3 victory. Now, compared to its other victories where The Lion King just destroyed the competition, here, Toy Story actually put up a decent fight, getting 1/3 of the votes. But also, The Lion King killed it with 2/3 of the vote, which means the winner of our Disney-Pixar bracket showdown is The Lion King. The Lion King remains the king of animated films. If you enjoy these bracket showdowns, I've done a ton of them. Disney live-action remakes, horror, Marvel, DC. If you just enjoy Disney or Pixar, I have ranked all 60+ Disney animated films. I've done all the Pixar films. You can check those out somewhere around here. Thank you so much for watching and participating in the polls, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.